Thank you everybody for coming for the future of Pride. Let's see how much we are going to talk about future. But first of all, we want to talk about what is happening right now. I want to introduce you to our three guests. Same-sex sexual activities became legal in Malta in 1973. 41 years later, the Civil Union Bill was passed in 2014. Since then, the situation for LGBTI became better and better in a very short time. According to the ILGA Europe ranking, Malta is in the lead with a percentage of 88%. So today, let's talk about the other 12% to go. Welcome, Colette from Malta Gay Rights Movement. A poll from 2009 showed that 84% of the Lithuanian society was against a Pride demonstration in Vilnius. Nevertheless, the first Pride march was held in 2010. The rotating Baltic Pride is a growing movement. Marriage equality might be far away, but what is the next step for Lithuania? Welcome, Thomas from the Lithuanian Gay League. Same-sex marriage, joint adoption, anti-discrimination laws, legal gender change without surgery or hormone therapy. Denmark, the land of milk and honey. Why do you still need Copenhagen Pride? Welcome, Lars. Thank you. So, Colette, it seems like all of a sudden Malta overtook every country when it comes to LGBT rights. Was it all of a sudden?
No. Is this working?
I think it is. Just, you need to speak. Oh, yeah.
Yes,
no,
maybe not.
You have to buy it.
Okay. So, no, of course it did not happen just overnight. It did happen with a lot of work from a lot of people who have contributed to the organizations that are present in Malta. But it did happen on a social level. It was different than the legal level. On a legal level, I think it did happen a bit overnight with a change in government in 2013, where we had the socialists coming into power, and they promised to start legislating in favor of the LGBTIQ community with the starting point of the civil union legislation. But I think something that I've heard the Prime Minister say is that he wants Malta to be at the top, and the conviction is to continue working to make Malta kind of the best country in Europe in terms of rights.
So, what do you think? What is the reason why he wants that?
I think it's a political opportunity as well, of course. But I think the LGBTIQ community had been in discussion with the government that was there before for a long time. We have been around, and I have been around in the organization since 2001, and we had been discussing with the politicians about these possible changes, these legal changes that were required, and there was no possibility of change under that government. So I think our Prime Minister, then obviously the opposition leaders, saw it as an opportunity for Malta to start progressing, but also I think he was one of the few politicians, and you've met also Dr. Helena Dalli, who's our Civil Liberties Minister, and also the President of Malta, who were always in the forefront supporting us. And I think they saw an opportunity also because they were in contact with the community, and they saw that there was stuff that they could do as politicians that nobody else was doing.
So thank you. I think we're coming back to that later. So homosexual activities in Denmark are legal since 1933, I read today. So I think it was before you were born.
Thank you for recognizing that.
So my question when it comes to this is, what is your personal approach for your activism?
Well, first of all, I would say that, until 1990, when the WHO, the World Health Organization, removed homosexuality from the list of mental disorders. And that's when I was 19 years old. I was looked upon as somebody with a disease. And even though Denmark unilaterally changed this already in 1981, and already then we're in the forefront, I think I have felt also in my personal life what it means to be ostracized from society. And I think that even in Denmark, where we have made such progress and where you could look at us and say we're such a liberal country, that I'm a school teacher also. And I see in my youth, even though they come up and are open about their sexuality earlier and earlier in their lives, I think that that personal journey that we're all on as young people, coming to terms with ourselves and realizing that we're different, and having to go out and tell our parents or our friends or our teachers and whoever it is that we're not living up to the expectations that everybody had to us. And so that personal journey is still as difficult for the individual, and even though we have more positive role models in the media and so on, you still have to come out and realize that you're different and understand, how is my life going to be? How am I going to pursue happiness in a different way than I was brought up with? So in many ways, my activism also comes from a point where I feel an obligation to make sure that there is an open community waiting for new people that come out, and also that we are ourselves taking upon us the responsibility of teaching our youth about our history, our culture, what makes us unique, what are our contributions to the world, why is it important to have a vibrant LGBTQI community, because diversity makes us all stronger. But if we're not making sure that young people know what they are part of and which shoulders they stand on, they're without history. And if you're without roots, you are very easily knocked over in a storm.
Thank you. Thomas, when you're hearing like positive role models in media and politicians pushing LGBT rights, is this, so maybe you can tell us something about the situation for LGBT in Lithuania, but is it for you personal activism more encouraging, or is it a bit demotivating?
So maybe I would like to start sharing my favorite moment from the Lithuanian Prides. So we don't host the Pride every year, we do it as a part of the Baltic Pride, so it's only happening every third year. So we had the one in 2010, which was under attack, 2013 with a huge presence of police, and finally in 2016 it was a major breakthrough because for the first time in the history of the country, Pride was a happy and joyful event. We still had a few protesters. Back in last year, and some of them were holding this nicely colored banner, and the banner said, "Let's leave the faggot union." And of course this picture, and of course by referring to faggot union, they mean the European Union, right? Because it promotes the gay values. And this picture got to the internet and Facebook, and I saw one incredible comment under that picture, and the comment was like that: "Yes, we already left the faggot union 27 years ago." And when we talk in the European context, of course, Lithuania is usually not the success story, but the story of disaster. But what I really like to concentrate, and what it really matters to me, that actually the Baltics, we are the success story. Because look at the other 12 former republics, and where are they in terms of LGBT rights? So I think it's always very, very important to concentrate and not to underestimate your legacy, because you cannot run away from your history. You have to embrace your history, learn very important lessons from your history, and definitely move forward. And this is what I think is happening in Lithuania very fast now. We are moving forward. We just need a little bit of time to catch up with countries in the West.
At the beginning I said in 2009, 84% percent were against a gay pride in Vilnius. I don't know if there's a new poll, but what is the feeling of going on the street right now?
So the Pride has been struggle. It has been a both social struggle because the society majorly disapproved. It was also an institutional struggle because major stakeholders tried to prevent it from happening. But I'm very, very happy and I'm very proud that I was part of that movement and that we are persistently pushing it through, because it really changed how the society looks upon LGBT people, upon LGBTI community. And just to give you a very concrete example, before we had the prides, the usual image they used to use when we had a news report on TV about the LGBT stuff, they used the parades from a very liberal environments, right? Like Berlin, Amsterdam, entailing all certain aspects of those events, right? And then when we had our own parades, the image changed. So it was not foreign anymore, it was people who are close to you, the local people. And I think that was very important because it made people realize that this is not something which is happening out there. We are talking about the people who are living close to us on an everyday basis. So I think that was very important, the visibility was the key. And I think, like, it might strange to you when I say, but there are major improvements of social acceptance in Lithuania regarding LGBT topics, because now it does not like create hysteria. Now it's a topic that we talk about. And I think the major reason why this is happening, because of the prides, because people had the chance to see people in a very concrete and physical way.
So what do you all think, you and Colette? How does your pride event affect your society in your cities or even in Google Island?
We've been having our pride since 2004, and we've never had one single protest. We've always had institutions who are supporting us, like police and you know, getting permits and all the mundane stuff that you need to do. They were always supporting us. This year, when we had the marriage equality discussion taking place in Parliament, we had our first protest. And that was a surprise. Because I think multi-society is very passive about everything. Nobody goes out to protest, nobody goes out to pride either. So it's not just about protesting. But this time around we had about 100 people, not a lot, but they were protesting outside Parliament, and they also held their own kind of little march on another day, talking about the traditional family, and they were mostly people coming from strong religious backgrounds. And in a way, I think because there was never any protesters before, this time around a lot of discussion taking place on social media was really ostracizing these people who are actually protesting. So it worked the other way around. I guess being present in Pride and the first Pride March taking place in 2004 meant that we thought we were just going to be 15 of us, you know, from the committee, and that's it. But more people turned up. We're just 100 people, but there were many politicians, there were many allies who actually turned up. And slowly it's picked up. It's nothing like here, of course. It's just maybe a maximum of 500 people coming. So that's, you know, that's really a reflection of how passive people are.
Or how big Malta is actually.
Okay, we're small. Well, I'm sure there are more than 500 people. At least I have many more friends on Facebook.
But also international.
Yes. But the fact that you know that we've held Pride every year, this has contributed a lot to some of the acceptance that has been happening over time. Of course, you know, Pride is one of the events taking place out of many awareness campaigns taking place as well. But giving an image, and I was touched by what Thomas said about the images of prides, because before we also had a lot of images of prides that were like the Berlin Pride or Amsterdam Pride, and a lot of people would, look down upon something like that because we're a very Catholic country, and anything which is liberal is kind of shunned upon. So then, now we have images of Maltese people appearing for Pride, and that kind of started giving a face to this community.
Well, as much as you said before about Denmark being decriminalizing and so on already in 1930 or 33 or when it was, up until the beginning of the 1970s, there was an overall concept in Denmark, and I think in many parts of the Western world, that blending in was the approach. That if we dressed nicely, put on our ties and suits, and sort of gave the image that we were just like everybody else, then at some point we would gain acceptance, and people would understand that we were not dangerous. To me, this was an approach that did not really move anything, and not until movements like the Gay Liberation Front or the CSD or in Denmark later on the Pride movement turned to a more outwardly activist, street-based activist movement, happening movement, did we actually push an agenda, because I'm completely on the same plate as you guys, and that it's very important to be visible. Pride is a visibility movement, and even if it sparks rejection from some people, at least it also sparks dialogue and debate. As long as we blend in, people can sort of shrug and not care, but if they're provoked by us, at least they talk. And then we can talk back, and then we can start a dialogue. And for us, you could say that even within the LGBTQI community, there has been a certain animosity towards Pride, because there is a group within our community that think that Pride is no longer important, or no longer valid, or no longer necessary, and some would even say that Pride is promoting stereotypes, and that they don't see themselves reflected in the people who participate in Pride. And my answer will always be that you are the only person responsible for representing you, and if you do not feel represented, then come and join. If I go out and take every 10th sequence of a drag queen in my parade, you're not more represented. So by sort of shutting down other people in their individuality, that just makes us all less visible, less happy, and less respected. So we fought back on that agenda very hard, but we've also tried to reignite Pride as a human rights movement. We've put a lot more emphasis in the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years actually, in our human rights program. So this year we have almost 60 different debate workshops and so on that are open to the public, and that are in a tent outside on Pride Square next to the City Hall of Copenhagen. And we actually invite people from Parliament and City Hall to participate, and that of course makes them aware of certain aspects of life as an LGBTQI, or challenges in our lives that they were not aware of before, and they're asked to take a stand on these things in an open environment where people see it, and they're filmed while they take this stand, and we then post it on our social media afterward, so we can hold them accountable for what they said. And that alone has meant that for many people we've sort of reignited the importance of Pride, and in that human rights aspect we are also inviting lots of activists like we are here today from all over the world. This year we have people from Pakistan, India, Uganda, Turkey, the United States of course, and all over Europe, and yeah, but I mean right now they're under siege, so we need to invite the less fortunate, even the Americans. And we do. But I mean, we can actually create a platform through Pride and through the progress that we have made to give people a platform to speak from when they don't have one at home. And maybe give them inspiration. We've also formed Pride partnerships with Queer Youth Uganda, who are part of the Kampala Pride and with Istanbul Pride, where we continuously during the year share experiences and we try to participate. We haven't been to Uganda yet, but this year we had a large contingency going to Istanbul, and thereby trying to also use our relative what can you say, the ease with which we organize Pride and the understanding that we have within the Danish society to push up the agendas of other people and to push our politicians to raise these issues in the relevant fora where they are. Because of course, if you're a politician and you go to the European Council or sit in the European Parliament, you have an easier access to changing things than I as a Pride organizer in Copenhagen. But they need to be pushed on that.
All right. So when we were talking about the effects for society, and what we're talking is the visibility part and how Pride affects the community itself, our community, the community in foreign countries. But what I ask myself is, do you all think that the Pride movement also is a political factor? Does it affect your MPs or whatever?
It is for sure, and it is because of a very simple reason, because politicians are scared of people at the streets. Because in the beginning, when we had like the first parade with a few hundred people, we were like pushed to the isolated area by the riverside, and the image was like, oh, those are lunatics walking there, not knowing what they wanting, right? But when you have 3,000 people on the main avenue in the city center, suddenly the conversation changes really rapidly, because these people are there and these people have the voting rights eventually, and they have families who support them. So I think that also sends a very, very strong political message. But I also think that the crucial aspect is to use Pride as a platform for certain political demands. Because sometimes I know marriage equality is now a big thing in Germany, or in certain countries registered partnerships are a big thing, but we always have to realize that the struggle doesn't end there. It has so many shades and so many aspects of it, and the majority, and absolutely all of those aspects are worth of being the political demands.
I think in terms of politicians attending Pride, for us it has been like these past few years, it has been like a bit of a competition. Kind of, we want to attend, we want to be there. Because it was, becoming like, if you're not there, then you're not supporting the community. And, you need to be seen to be supporting the community. Especially in these last two elections, and we've seen a big development taking place in this last election, where in Malta there's like political activities taking place every day when there's election time, including really huge meetings where the politicians are addressing the crowds, and there's thousands of people there, and there were many gay flags and trans flags. And we sold many of them, so it's really great for a fundraising opportunity for us. But it was an excellent image, to see so many LGBTI people present in these meetings, making a statement with their flags. And it wasn't just, the political flag that was being waved, but also Maltese flags and these flags. And being present there and seeing this happening, for me, was another Pride. It wasn't the Pride platform that we are creating, but people were out there creating their own Pride, creating their own statements of saying, listen, politicians, we're here. If you're going to promise us marriage equality, we're supporting you. And with my flag, because obviously in the crowd you can't really be seen, but with my flag, I can be seen. And that is, I think, something that has been a result of the effect of all these changes, legal changes that has been happening. People feel more empowered. I think the first thing that happened with the civil union legislation in 2014, that kind of gave the first recognition to lesbian and gay and bisexual community in terms of the legal recognition, but it also empowered the community. And now we can see this happening. Now we can see people creating their own platforms of how to voice their opinion as well.
Okay, so you were talking about marriage equality, so I have a question for that. Yeah. So we were in Madrid on the 30th of June watching the voting on the same-sex marriage thing in Parliament, and on the same evening, at least I met you and you, because there was a big reception of the Interpride and the European Pride Organizers Association. And actually we were treated like little queens because marriage equality passed the Parliament. And it was the first time me waving a flag of Germany in a foreign country. But everybody was fine with that, surprisingly. So everyone was happy, celebrating, we were talking, you were moved, really moved. And so how does the Marriage Equality Act in Germany affect, not you because you did it a few weeks later, but Lithuania and Copenhagen?
So for us, I think it really has the impact of what's happening in the European space, especially in the European Union. And I think both Germany and Malta was a big thing. Malta was a big thing because of the Catholic aspect, because we are very religious as well. And the main question in the public discourse was framed, okay, so why Malta can do this, and this is so foreign to us. And I think that really, really played in our favor. And in terms of Germany, it was also a very big thing, not only because of the size and impact that Germany plays in the Union, but also of close geographical proximity. Because literally, the marriage is getting closer to us. And they won't be able to escape it at some point. Well, we have Poland in between. That might be a bit difficult to deal with. So maybe we need to reach it through Finland.
Well, if I can just add to that, I think that Germany did not have marriage equality was also used as an excuse for other countries to not go there, because if a big progressive liberal Western European country could decide to not go there, then it was sort of okay for others to not also. But I also think that the Pride movement in these years, because we're also a movement that stands for inclusivity, and in that aspect we also need to address things like ethnicity and gender and other aspects. And within a Europe that becomes increasingly nationalistic and xenophobic, on that agenda, I know that many of us see Germany as the good conscience of Europe. You have actually stepped up in a way that we wish many of our leaders would, and continuously maintained an approach to people of different ethnicities that were different to many countries in Europe. So in that aspect, now because of that, and that Germany now joined the good society of states with equal marriage. Again, you're with us. There's no, we can't point to Germany and say there's something wrong here, because we want to use you as the shining example of the possibility of living together in an atmosphere of understanding and I know that Denmark is unfortunately becoming more and more xenophobic in these years, and I'm not very proud of that. And for the Germans to continuously speak up against this in a European context has been a great inspiration to me, and I hope that you will continue to do so.
So a few weeks ago we had the G20 summit in Hamburg.
We noticed.
And we we, as Hamburg Pride, we did a rally. It was called Gay 20. And we invited Haziran Duskan from Istanbul Pride. And during her speech, she said one part which I still have in mind, but I still have to read it. Istanbul Pride is an example of building something big and exciting, losing major parts of what you thought you achieved. So, Malta, like in the last 3 to 5 years, we can say, everything was done. More or less.
More or less.
More or less. And it came with the change of the government. Looking to the US, you said, for example, shows how things can be removed. So my question is, what do you think, how sustainable will be the achievements we made?
Can I start? Because this is very, very important to me. I've often used, also in a Danish context, the image that we have for many years been sort of rolling a giant boulder uphill, and now it's sort of poised on the top of a mountain. But the minute we stop supporting it, it will start tumbling down in our faces again and crush us. So therefore, we cannot just lean back and say we achieved 88% or 75% or wherever the fuck we are on that list. We have to continue pushing, and we have to continue balancing the boulder off. And America is an example, Turkey is an example, Russia is an example. I think that when in 2012-13, so many of us went to the streets and demonstrated against Russia, it was not because we were, of course we were appalled by what happened in Russia, but it was because progress that was sort of like the progress we had made was suddenly rolled back. It was such a shock to us that things didn't just move forward all the time. That was the first major example of a country taking what we say often is referred to human rights as unalienable. They're not. Helena Dali in the IDEHART conference in Copenhagen said, when asked what happened in Malta, how could you achieve this? And she said 2 words, political will. And if there is no political will anymore, it can go the other way. So we have to constantly push for political will, because that doesn't come by itself.
Yeah. I think something else that I would say is also essential, besides us continuing to support this, is also to get more allies. And that is something that I have seen coming a long way in Malta. And you get this through so many spaces. I mean, sometimes, you're just watching TV and there's a vox pop, just stopping, sometimes old people, and they're asking them, what do you think about marriage equality? And they say, everybody should be allowed to marry whoever they like. And this is what we really need to do. We can't just keep on fighting on our own. We need allies, and by allies I mean, there's no more us and them, but there's more of, let's do this all together. And the more we're united in terms of this fight for human rights, and I'm not just talking about the LGBTIQ rights, but also other rights, ethnic rights, and rights of refugees, and rights of different genders, and women, etc. We need to do this all together, because what's happening in the US is not just about the same-sex marriage, but it's about everything else. And something that we're seeing in Malta, yes, fine, LGBTIQ issues are at the top, but there's so many other issues that we really need to be working on, such as refugees, for example, and another in terms of identities, that there's so much intersectionality. I mean, LGBTIQ people are not just LGBTIQ, but we are everything else as well. So I think solidarity is also something that we really need to continue working on, to continue to hold this movement, going up and keeping the boulder up there.
So when you're talking about allies and solidarity,
Yeah.
and so this goes out to everyone, the question I have is how to create this environment of solidarity, because I have the feeling for Germany, for example, even here, because you said we're so xenophobic, which I wouldn't share,
Compared to many places, let's say.
compared to many places maybe. But I have the feeling that solidarity between the people, even inside the community of the LGBT and outside of the community, is getting less and less. So what are the approaches you are trying to do to create this allies network and solidarity?
I think what Malta has been trying to do and what MGRM has been trying to do is becoming part of other platforms that are working on other intersectional identities. For example, MGRM is part of the women's group. It's part of another human rights platform. It's part of a domestic violence platform as well. This is how you network with other organizations and bring people to see that LGBTIQ issues are not any special issue, but this is, if we're talking about, for example, domestic violence, we need to be talking about domestic violence in as open as possible about all types of relationships and not just about the heteronormative relationships that they're always out there in the images when we're talking about DV. So it's really about stemming out and doing more work. It is about doing a lot more work than just focusing on our particular issues.
Yeah, and I would say we do the same things on different networks for women, for integration, for that, but on a political level. But we also try to make sure that in many of the other festivals that are in Copenhagen throughout the year, that we work with them and make sure that there is an LGBT presence in all of these. So we cannot make a Copenhagen History Festival or a Copenhagen Half Marathon or whatever it is. It can be any variation of things without a presence of Copenhagen Pride with an LGBT platform saying that there are also LGBTs running a half marathon or who are interested in history, and that our history should be part of this as well. And we cannot expect, well, we could expect it, but experience tells me differently. It is not necessarily so that people in other contexts think us in as a natural component in their festival, so we have to push for that. And of course that takes a lot of work. We're now up to about 60 days of extrovert activities throughout the year, where we do something that involves an audience or audience participation in some way in Copenhagen Pride. So it's like throughout the year now.
So I think the importance of allyship could not be underestimated, and I was very surprised last year, and of course it's a very subjective impression, but having the successful Pride in Vilnius, I felt like around 80% of the people in the crowd were not LGBTs themselves, they were allies. And for me it was very beautiful, but of course it was very beautiful because most people, they came there not only to support your cause, but we also came to support a certain idea or vision of the society that we want to be as a country. Like open, brave, not close-minded. And I think sometimes, even especially in my context, in my geopolitical context, LGBT cause out of a sudden becomes a very important tipping point of which way we choose. And I take an exceptional pride in this, that my cause can act as a litmus test for what we stand as a country and as a society. So I think the capacity of placing your own needs or your own demands within this context can also really, really help, because I think we talk about identities and individual stories, but after all, LGBT topics, it's pure politics. It's pure politics.
All right, you already told us right in the beginning what your greatest moment was during your work as an activist. I would like to give this question to you. So what was the time when you felt a bit mighty or or powerful or proud on on what you achieved? It's the biggest moment, maybe.
I think this comes in two different levels for me. I have this moment every year in Pride, and I had it probably most strongly in 2009 when World Out Games was in Copenhagen, and it was really massive. But it's every year that I have this moment where I'm in front of the crowd, or part of the crowd, in the center of Copenhagen, in front of City Hall, and I realize that right now, in the center of my city, I'm part of the majority. I never have that sensation at any other time in my life. I'm also part of some sort of minority, or the odd one out. It can be at my work, where I'm the only colleague that's gay, or in my family, or in so many settings. But suddenly we're setting the agenda, and we're the majority. And I can wink at any guy without being afraid of getting hit on the face. Maybe he won't wink back, but at least he will not be So that's on a very personal note, and I have it every year, and I get the goosebumps thinking of it. But also every year, somebody writes us an email or a letter. Letters not so much anymore, because the Danish Postal Service is really rotten. But writes us and say, I never thought I would have the courage to walk in a Pride parade. I went out, I just expected to look on. And in Copenhagen, you're allowed to actually join. And I stood there and I saw all these people, and I even saw people I knew. And then I thought, brave today. And then I marched, and I felt wonderful. And when I get these life-changing moments from people, that makes it worth every fucking trouble that we ever go through. It's wonderful. And I think we are changing lives. I mean, every time we have these little moments where people are empowered or feel part of something, we save lives, and if we save lives, we save a world.
I think for me, there have been a number of them, but I will stick to the last one, and that was when I was present for the discussion on marriage equality in Parliament. And for the first time, I was inspired by the politicians. I enjoyed listening to them talk about a topic that is, very close to my heart. It's about me, and they spoke so well. They were educated for once, and they spoke. they knew what they're talking about, and I enjoyed listening to them. And that was something that really moved me, because I've experienced so many politicians saying so much rubbish about what my life, about the people I know and this community, that I felt inspired for once. But you mentioned something that really touched me as well, and it is the people I work with. I'm a social worker, and one of the things that MGRM does is offer support to the community, and we've been doing this ever since I graduated, so that's 13 years. And we've met so many people, we've touched so many lives, and people keep coming. And even though our society has become more open and we have marriage equality and all of this, but there's still a lot of people struggling. And people are struggling alone most of the time. And when I'm talking about people, I'm not just talking about the LGBTIQ individual, child or adult, but also their families. And when they actually make contact, for me that is a huge achievement, that people have found some sort of support, whether it's just coming for one session and talking about their struggles and finding new ways of how to cope with their life, or if it's multiple sessions and referring them to a psychologist if that's necessary. Whatever the intervention that we carry out, it's my pleasure doing it, but also I am privileged to be at that position, that these people are sharing their lives with me. So that's something else that touches me a lot.
All right. It would have been a good question to end, but I'm not finished yet. So, I want to go back to another part a bit when it comes to solidarity, and I want to, for me it's always difficult to explain what networking and European networking, what we're doing, is really necessary for. It's always, for me it's a struggle because the real feeling I get is more emotional. But how would you describe how important is this networking aspect of being an LGBT activist in Europe, for example, or even in the world?
And you're looking at me, right? Well, I think it's incredibly important because it builds the common identity in a way, the identity of not nationalities, but the identity of values. And I think Europe has been torn apart so many times. So we really need to find those avenues and those qualities that really unites us, despite of distinguishing us from each other. And I really have a plethora of friends all across Europe who are also LGBT, and I think I'm very privileged in that way to see how their lives are similar to my life and how their struggles are similar to the struggles that we deal every day. So it really makes you feel stronger in a way that knowing you're not alone, especially coming from a more difficult country. When we were chatting with Colette before, it's like, I said, okay, I'm very happy for you now, but I'm sure that I'll be very happy in next 20 years as well. And it really keeps you going. It really keeps you going.
I remember when we started out in 2001, and we were a bunch of people not knowing what we should be doing, but we wanted to set up an organization that works for LGBT rights. And I think the moment of progress actually happened when we joined and became members of ILGA Europe. And that platform, being present, participating, contributing, we had also members of our committee who were also very active in ILGA Europe and ILGA World, and still are. And the capacity building that we got from there, and the support of the direction, the solidarity that you start getting from other organizations from all over Europe, gave us something that if we had stood alone, for all these years, I'm sure we wouldn't have achieved it. The first one happened actually in, I think, 2002 or 3, when there was the legislation, the directive of employment, and the Maltese government was simply refusing to put sexual orientation as one of the grounds for non-discrimination. And we managed to get this, not because we were shouting and protesting, but because we lobbied through ILGA Europe, who lobbied through the European Union. And then when Odile Quinton came to Malta, she said, no, it has to be done like that. And it happened.
Sorry.
Yeah, and that's how it happened. But then this is solidarity, because this is networking. I think this is a very clear example that us alone would not probably have managed, maybe, or would have managed in a longer period of time. And also I think what we've learned, I mean, if I hadn't been to so many ILGA Europe and so many IGLIO events, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I wouldn't have all the knowledge that I have today, and I wouldn't have been able to share what I know with the rest of the Maltese community. So it's really, part of a chain that we need to continue working together.
Yeah, well, I don't have much to add to that because I think that was so eloquently said. But I also think that we have an important role, for example, in Copenhagen or here, to invite people and give our experiences on to other people. And we try to always, when we invite people to Copenhagen, to then set up meetings with decision makers in Denmark, politicians or NGOs that could be relevant for their work in their own countries, so that they don't just come as the token difficult country activists that are there, but that they actually go home empowered and with new connections to continue their work. And I think at the end of the day, regardless of where people come from, I generally experience that I have more in common with any LGBTQI person than my neighbor across the street who is not LGBTQI.
So, I lost my question. I'm really lost. So maybe I'm done. But no, of course I said it in the radio, so I have to ask, and I said it at the beginning. So when it comes to this ranking, I read it today, and I was thinking of how do they do it, because then I thought it's from May 2017, and Germany was still in the middle, and equal marriage wasn't passed then, and then I tried to calculate how much percent we might have. No, I failed. Nevertheless, so the 12%, whatever this is. So what are the issues for you on the plate?
I think trans health is one of the major issues that we're working on. Also intersex health, despite having a legislation that talks about, that bans surgeries happening on children who are born intersex, there's still no management system taking place. That's been dragging along since 2015. There's also more work being done in the area of HIV, so more of the 12% really, and more policies on the ground that affect people's lives. For example, one of the things that we have in place now is the policy for gender variant and intersex children in schools, or the policy on transgender persons in prison. These have also contributed to the percentage. There's a lot more on the ground to be done. So maybe not legislations, besides the equality legislation, which is still lacking. But otherwise, there's a lot more stuff on the ground to be doing.
So what would you think is your major task when it comes to politics? Is there anyone, or is it more like a society reason for pride?
Well, there are certainly policy issues that we need to raise. We're working very hard on transgender, not only transgender rights, but also how transgenders are treated in the Danish healthcare system. And intersex is now becoming the next battleground also in Denmark. We don't have that legislation in place yet where it's illegal to perform surgery on intersex children, which is a great problem. And you don't in Germany either, I know, because Amnesty International just in April came out with a report where they focus on Denmark and Germany on these issues. And there are many similarities between how this is dealt with in the Danish and the German system. That is another example of good collaboration where we've worked with Amnesty International on this, because they have a different setup we're all volunteers, but they actually have people on a salary who can do large-scale reports like that and get them out there. What we have then done is that we have opted to get the OII, the European Organization of Intersex Individuals, AGM to Copenhagen in February, so that we can then address it in front of our politicians with the background in the report that came out, hopefully pushing this. But then, as you said, there is a society, a thing about even if we got to 100%, you or we. Legislation is, the Danish Parliament has 179 members, so at the end of the day we need to convince 90 people to change legislation. But to change the mindset of a population means having a debate or a dialogue with, in Denmark's case, 5.6 million people, and have the willingness to sit down and address these things with people who are on a completely different planet from you, and understand where they come from and listen to them, and hopefully change how they think on these issues. And that's so much more work, because that's almost 6 million conversations that we need to have, and probably more than one time. So just because you change the legislation, you don't necessarily impact how people perceive these things, and we need to create understanding and awareness.
So I would say, for you and for me, marriage equality was a milestone, and then we need to go more forward. So what is your next milestone?
So it's very funny. So Colette has 18% to go. I have 81% to go. So of course we have a very clearly identified policy priorities. The first one is getting rid of anti-gay propaganda legislation. Unfortunately, we have the same as Russia does. Just a good case in our scenario, it's not being actively enforced. The second one is, of course, legal recognition of same-sex couples in one form or another, because at the moment there are only 6 countries in the European Union which does not provide for this opportunity, and we already have this joke, Lithuania was the last pagan country in Europe, maybe we're going to be the last one to do this as well. And the final one is related to transgender issues, the introduction of legal gender recognition and medical gender reassignment. And I have been very inspired to see the very rapid changes that Lithuania is going towards direction in this sphere. And then the 1st of September, the Minister of Health is launching the healthcare protocol for trans people. And we have been working very hard in the recent months with the Minister of Justice on the law for legal gender recognition. It's going to be a damn good law. I just hope that the politicians will have the guts to adopt it. So if you work hard, certain things move forward. And I think that has to happen.
All right, I think I need to come to the title of this talk, which was Future of Pride. I didn't tell you, I think. So when we think of the future, and I think we are all agreeing that pride is still needed, so this is what I heard from all of you. So when we think of the future, maybe we skip into the year 2027, for example, like 10 years ahead. So what will you celebrate then?
27.
27.
What and how?
Well, I don't know how long things are going to take. I hope that we're far beyond legislation on intersex and transgender and stuff, and so that's not something we'll be celebrating in 2027. But I think we will. I hope that we will still be celebrating, which I think we're doing right now also, our commitment to an inclusive, accepting, and diverse community or society. Because that's also what pride is. It's a set of values that people can adhere to, whether they're LGBTI identified or not. You just said that you saw your allies as identifying with these values. We actually sent out students to ask, because we were sort of thinking in 2014, are people perceiving us as a carnival, or have they really gotten the message? So we asked people along the parade route, how do you self-identify and why are you here? And there was an overwhelming, it was 84%, I think, said that of the non-LGBTQI identified spectators who said, we're here because we want to support the values that Pride promotes, and we brought our children because we want to show them that we live in an inclusive and accepting city. So in some ways we have passed that message on to the wider community, but we have to push forward to that and make sure that that is still what we're celebrating.
I hope to be celebrating diversity and embracing of different identities coming together and seeing that there's no real difference, you know, there's no more wall that kind of separates us. And that is kind of what you were saying, that you know, families are coming along, and it's already started to happen as well in Malta, that you know, families, heterosexual families are coming and celebrating. Because this is the message they want to pass on to their kids. Or maybe they might think that their children might be LGBTIQ in the future, and they want to tell them it's okay. So I hope we continue to celebrate this, and yeah, 10 years from now.
I'm pretty sure, I hope, and I'm sure that all of us are going to do all our efforts that in 2027 we're still able to celebrate Europe.
Yes.
So let's hope for that.
Here, here, here.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if, are there any questions here you want to ask? Because if not,
Very leading.
we can make it in a more informal way over there in the Altstadtbar. Hello? Any questions, maybe? Because I think maybe it would be nice to have a little drink, and I think all of them are available for you. So I would thank you very much for coming.